The crimson dust of Kepler 442b swirled violently across the abandoned battlefield, carrying with it the metallic scent of alien blood and the acrid smoke of plasma burns. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her tactical visor against the rocky outcrop, scanning the desolate wasteland that stretched beyond the human forward operating base. 3 months had passed since the Zephyrian Empire declared war on the Terran Federation, and this god-forsaken planet had become ground zero for humanity's first interstellar conflict. "Movement detected, Sector 7, whispered Sergeant Martinez through the comm channel, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. "Looks like another Zephyrian patrol sweeping the ruins." Sarah adjusted her position, the advanced combat suit automatically compensating for the planet's lighter gravity. The Zephyrians had been relentless in their assault, using this world as a testing ground for their new military technologies. Their war machines were impressive, their tactics refined through centuries of conquest across multiple star systems. But they had made one critical error in their calculations about humanity. They had underestimated human curiosity and the peculiar way humans formed emotional attachments to the most unlikely creatures. A sharp, keening wail cut through the atmospheric static, causing every human soldier within a kilometer radius to freeze. The sound was unlike anything they had heard from Zephyrian weapons or vehicles. It carried a note of pain so pure and desperate that it bypassed rational thought and struck directly at something primal in the human psyche. "Did you hear that?" Private Jackson's voice cracked slightly through the communication system. "Copy that. All units, maintain position but stay alert," Sarah commanded, though her own pulse had quickened at the sound. Could be a Zephyrian trap or some kind of psychological warfare. The cry came again, weaker this time, but no less heartbreaking. Sarah found herself standing despite every tactical protocol screaming at her to stay hidden. There was something in that sound that reminded her of her old German Shepherd back on Earth, the way Rex used to whimper when he was hurt or scared. "Captain, thermal imaging is picking up a heat signature approximately 200 meters northeast of our position," reported Corporal Williams from the communications bunker. "It's not moving much, and the signature is weird. Doesn't match any known Zephyrian life signs." Sarah made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed under normal circumstances. "Martinez, Jackson, you're with me. Williams, keep monitoring our 6. We're going to investigate." The 3 humans moved across the alien landscape with practiced efficiency, their boots making soft crunching sounds on the crystalline sand. The planet's twin suns cast eerie shadows that seemed to dance and shift with each gust of wind. As they approached the source of the distress calls, Sarah began to make out a dark shape, partially buried beneath a collapsed section of Zephyrian architecture. What she saw when they drew closer defied every briefing she had received about enemy forces. The creature was massive, easily the size of a small vehicle, with sleek black fur that seemed to absorb the ambient light. Its body was clearly built for speed and power, with long, muscular limbs and a streamlined torso that spoke of evolutionary perfection in the art of warfare. But it was the creature's face that stopped Sarah cold. Large, intelligent eyes, the color of liquid amber, stared up at them with a mixture of pain, fear, and something that looked remarkably like hope. The creature's snout was elongated and elegant, filled with teeth that could easily tear through steel, yet it made no aggressive moves toward the approaching humans. Instead, it let out another soft whimper that tugged at something deep in Sarah's chest. "Jesus Christ," Martinez breathed, lowering his weapon slightly. "It's some kind of alien dog." "Negative," Jackson corrected, consulting his scanner. "Biological readings indicate it's definitely not canine, but the behavioral patterns are remarkably similar. Look at the way it's watching us." The creature's left hind leg was pinned beneath a massive piece of twisted metal, clearly from some kind of Zephyrian war machine. Dark blue blood seeped from multiple wounds across its body, and its breathing was labored but steady. Most telling of all was the high-tech collar around its neck, covered in Zephyrian symbols and blinking with the unmistakable indicators of military hardware. "It's a war animal," Sarah realized aloud. "The Zephyrians have been using these things in combat, and this one got left behind." The creature's ears, which had been pinned back in fear, suddenly perked up at the sound of her voice. It tilted its head in a gesture so familiar, so universally recognizable to anyone who had ever owned a dog, that all three humans felt their hearts skip a beat. "Captain, we should call this in," Martinez suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Command needs to know about Zephyrian bioweapons." "Look at it," Jackson said softly, slowly extending his hand toward the trapped animal. "Does that look like a weapon to you?" The creature sniffed the air cautiously, then stretched its neck forward to investigate Jackson's offered hand. When the alien's nose made contact with the human's glove, both species froze. The warhound's eyes widened in what could only be described as wonder, while Jackson's face broke into the kind of grin usually reserved for Christmas morning. "It's warm," Jackson reported unnecessarily, "and it's trying to lick my hand through the glove." Sarah felt her tactical training warring with an emotional response she couldn't quite name. Every regulation in the book said they should either eliminate the potential threat or report it to intelligence for interrogation. But looking down at those amber eyes, seeing the way the creature's tail had begun to move slightly despite its obvious pain, she found herself thinking about every stray dog she had ever stopped to help, every animal video that had made her smile during long deployments. "We can't just leave it here," she said finally. "Captain?" Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Think about it strategically," Sarah continued, though she knew she was rationalizing. "This creature represents an intelligence asset. It's been inside Zephyrian military operations. It might have information we can use." The warhound seemed to sense their indecision. It made another soft sound, different from the earlier cries of pain. This was a gentle, almost conversational noise that somehow conveyed both gratitude and a request for help. Then it did something that sealed its fate, and the fate of the three humans standing over it. It rolled onto its back as much as the trapped leg would allow, exposing its vulnerable belly in the universal gesture of trust and submission. "Aw, hell," Martinez muttered, slinging his rifle and kneeling beside the creature. "Jackson, get the medical kit. Captain, we're going to need the portable plasma cutter to get this metal off its leg." "This is insane," Sarah said, but she was already activating her emergency beacon to call for backup. "We're risking our lives and our mission for an alien that might eat our faces the second we free it." "Look at those eyes and tell me this thing is going to hurt us," Jackson challenged, already running his medical scanner over the creature's injuries. Sarah looked. The warhound was watching their every move with intense intelligence, its gaze shifting from one human to another as if trying to memorize their faces. There was no hostility there, no predatory calculation. Instead, there was something that looked remarkably like gratitude, mixed with a profound loneliness that spoke to the part of the human soul that had been domesticating wolves for thousands of years. "Scan shows multiple fractures in the trapped limb, but nothing immediately life-threatening," Jackson reported. "The bleeding has mostly stopped, and vital signs are stable. Whatever these things are, they're tough." The rescue operation took nearly 2 hours. The warhound remained perfectly still while they worked, occasionally making soft, encouraging sounds when one of the humans looked at it directly. When Martinez finally cut through the last piece of metal pinning its leg, the creature immediately tried to stand, only to collapse again with a yelp of pain. "Easy, boy," Sarah found herself saying, using the same tone she had always used with Rex. "Easy. We've got you." The Warhound looked at her with what could only be described as surprise, then carefully lowered itself back down and placed its massive head across Sarah's lap. The gesture was so trusting, so inherently dog-like, that she felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. "We need to get it back to base," Jackson said. "These injuries need proper treatment, and we need to figure out what we're dealing with." "Command is going to have our heads," Martinez pointed out. "We just rescued an enemy war beast." "Then we'd better make sure it's worth it," Sarah replied, gently stroking the alien fur. It was softer than she had expected, with an almost silk-like texture that seemed to shimmer in the alien sunlight. The Warhound closed its eyes and made a sound that was unmistakably a purr. The journey back to the human base was slow and careful. They had fashioned a makeshift stretcher from equipment and alien debris, but the creature insisted on trying to walk as much as possible, limping along beside them with a determination that spoke to either incredible toughness or an unwillingness to be a burden. "Incoming transmission from Base Command," Williams announced through their comm system. "Captain Chen, you are ordered to report your status immediately." Sarah keyed her microphone with a heavy sigh. "Base Command, this is Captain Chen. We are returning to base with a wounded asset. Request immediate medical support and a secure containment area." "Negative, Captain. Explain the nature of this asset." Sarah looked down at the Warhound, which was gazing up at her with those impossibly expressive eyes. "Command, we have recovered what appears to be a Zephyrian military animal. It was wounded and abandoned. We believe it may provide valuable intelligence." There was a long pause. "Captain Chen, are you telling me you rescued an enemy war beast?" "That's technically accurate, sir." Another pause, longer this time. "Bring it in, Captain. But if that thing so much as growls at anyone, you're putting it down. Understood?" "Understood, sir." The Warhound seemed to sense the tension in Sarah's voice. It nudged her hand gently with its nose, then looked toward the base with what could only be described as curiosity. When they finally reached the perimeter, a crowd of soldiers had gathered to see the alien creature that had somehow convinced 3 seasoned combat veterans to risk their careers for a rescue mission. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, the base's xenobiologist, was waiting with a full medical team and enough tranquilizer to drop a rhino. She took one look at the Warhound and immediately ordered everyone except essential personnel to step back. "Fascinating," she murmured, approaching slowly with her scanner active. "The bone structure is incredibly dense, musculature suggests it's built for both speed and power, and those neural pathway readings are off the charts. This thing is smart, really smart." The Warhound watched the doctor's approach with alert but calm attention. When she extended her hand, it sniffed carefully, then allowed her to touch its head. The crowd of watching soldiers let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. "It's not showing any signs of aggression," Dr. Reyes reported. "Heart rate is elevated but not dangerously so, and its body language is, well, it's remarkably similar to a domesticated canine." "Has it displayed any hostile behavior?" "None," Sarah replied. "It's been nothing but cooperative since we found it." "Incredible. Captain, I need to run a full medical and psychological evaluation, but based on preliminary observations, I don't think this creature poses an immediate threat. In fact," she paused, consulting her scanner, "the neural patterns I'm seeing suggest it may actually be capable of forming emotional attachments similar to Earth canines." The Warhound suddenly perked up, its attention focused on something beyond the crowd of humans. Sarah followed its gaze and felt her blood run cold. 3 Zephyrian aircraft were approaching the base at high speed, their weapon systems clearly active. "Incoming hostiles!" someone shouted, and the entire base exploded into activity as soldiers ran for defensive positions. The Warhound struggled to its feet, balancing on 3 legs as it stared at the approaching ships. For a moment, Sarah wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Was this creature somehow calling to its masters? Had they just brought a Trojan horse into their midst? But instead of signaling to the aircraft, the Warhound did something that stunned everyone present. It positioned itself between the humans and the approaching threat, bared its impressive teeth, and let out a sound that was unlike anything they had heard before. It was part howl, part roar, and entirely defiant. It was the sound of a creature that had chosen its side. The Zephyrian ships opened fire, but their targeting seemed confused. Instead of focusing on the base's defensive positions, they appeared to be aiming randomly, as if they couldn't quite locate their intended targets. The Warhound's howling continued, growing more intense, and Sarah realized with growing amazement that the creature was somehow interfering with the enemy's targeting systems. "It's jamming their scanners!" Dr. Reyes shouted over the noise of incoming plasma fire. "That collar isn't just a control device. It's a sophisticated piece of military hardware, and it's working for us now." The battle was brief, but intense. With their targeting systems compromised, the Zephyrian pilots were forced to rely on visual identification, giving the human defenders a crucial advantage. All three enemy aircraft were brought down within minutes, crashing into the alien landscape in brilliant explosions of blue and orange flame. When the shooting stopped, the Warhound collapsed from exhaustion, its body finally giving in to the combination of injuries and the energy expenditure of its electronic warfare assistants. Sarah was beside it in seconds, checking its pulse and speaking in the same soothing tones she had used during the rescue. "You saved us," she whispered, running her fingers through the alien fur. "You beautiful, brave creature. You saved all of us." The Warhound opened one amber eye and looked at her with an expression that seemed to say that saving her pack was simply what any good dog would do. Then it closed its eyes again and allowed itself to rest, secure in the knowledge that it was no longer alone in the vast, cold universe. As medical teams rushed to stabilize their unlikely savior, Captain Sarah Chen found herself making a decision that would change the course of the war and redefine what it meant to be human in an age of interstellar conflict. They weren't just going to treat this creature's wounds and study it for intelligence value. They were going to give it a home. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue, and the alien Warhound had become the most talked-about resident of Firebase Echo. The medical bay had been converted into a specialized recovery unit, complete with environmental controls adjusted for the creature's physiology and a constant rotation of soldiers who had volunteered to help with its care. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes stood before a holographic display showing the latest scan results, her expression a mixture of fascination and concern. "The healing rate is remarkable," she explained to Captain Chen and the assembled command staff. "Bone density has increased by 30% since we started treatment, neural activity is off the charts, and the creature shows signs of rapid adaptation to our environment." "Adaptation how?" asked Colonel Morrison, the base commander who had reluctantly approved the creature's continued presence after its heroic defense of the base. "It's learning our language," Dr. Reyes replied simply. "Not just basic commands, which would be impressive enough, but actual linguistic comprehension. It understands complex sentences, responds to abstract concepts, and yesterday I caught it trying to manipulate the medical scanner with its paws to examine its own injuries." Through the reinforced observation window, they could see the Warhound lying on a specially constructed platform, its injured leg now properly splinted and healing well. Sergeant Martinez sat beside it, reading from a tablet while the creature listened with obvious attention, its head tilted in concentration. "What's Martinez reading to it?" Captain Chen asked. "Today's mission briefings," Dr. Reyes answered with a slight smile. "The creature seems to understand that these reports contain important information about ongoing operations. It pays particular attention whenever Zephyrian forces are mentioned." Colonel Morrison frowned. "Doctor, are you suggesting this animal understands military strategy?" Sir, with respect, I stopped thinking of this creature as just an animal about 2 weeks ago. The intelligence tests I've conducted put its cognitive abilities somewhere between those of a human child and a tactical computer. It's not just smart, it's emotionally complex, strategically aware, and increasingly loyal to our personnel. As if sensing it was being discussed, the Warhound looked up from Martinez's reading and made direct eye contact with Captain Chen through the window. Its tail moved slightly in what had become a recognized greeting, and it made a soft, chuffing sound that the medical team had learned meant, "Hello." "Have we made any progress on understanding the collar?" Chen asked. "That's where things get really interesting." Dr. Reyes pulled up another display showing the intricate device around the creature's neck. It's not just a control mechanism like we initially thought. It's a full-spectrum communication and battlefield coordination system. The Zephyrians weren't just using these creatures as weapons, they were using them as living command and control platforms. Meaning this Warhound has access to encrypted Zephyrian military communications, tactical databases, and what appears to be real-time intelligence on enemy troop movements. The collar has been actively downloading and storing data from every Zephyrian transmission within a 50-kilometer radius. Colonel Morrison's eyes widened. "Are you telling me we've been housing a walking intelligence goldmine for 3 weeks?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, sir. And there's more. The creature seems willing to share this information with us, but only through direct interaction with personnel it trusts. It won't respond to attempts at data extraction or forced interface connections." Captain Chen felt a familiar warmth in her chest as she watched the Warhound gently nose Martinez's hand, requesting that the sergeant continue reading. "It's not just sharing intelligence," she said quietly. "It's choosing to help us because it wants to." The morning briefing was interrupted by an urgent alarm. Lieutenant Torres burst into the room with a grim expression. "Colonel, we've got multiple Zephyrian dropships approaching from the north. Long-range scouts report at least 3 companies of heavy assault troops, plus armor support." "How long until they reach our perimeter?" Morrison demanded. 18 minutes, sir. They're coming in fast and low, avoiding our early warning systems." The Warhound's behavior in the medical bay suddenly changed dramatically. Its head snapped up, ears alert, and it began making urgent vocalizations that set every human in the room on edge. The collar around its neck flickered with rapidly changing displays of alien symbols. "It knows," Dr. Reyes breathed. "The collar is picking up Zephyrian tactical communications. It knows about the attack." Captain Chen made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. "Open the containment field." "Captain?" Colonel Morrison's voice carried a note of warning. "Sir, if this creature wants to help us defend the base, we should let it. And frankly, we're going to need every advantage we can get against 3 companies of Zephyrian assault troops." The containment field deactivated, and the Warhound immediately limped toward the exit, its injured leg clearly still causing pain but not slowing its determination. It paused at the doorway and looked back at the humans, making a series of complex vocalizations while touching its collar with one paw. "It's trying to tell us something," Martinez said, approaching slowly. "The collar display is showing what looks like tactical positions." Dr. Reyes consulted her translation software. "I think it's offering to coordinate our defensive response using its access to enemy communications. It can track their movements in real time and predict their strategy." The Warhound nodded vigorously when it heard the word strategy, then limped rapidly toward the command center, clearly expecting the humans to follow. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The creature positioned itself at the central tactical display, its collar interfacing seamlessly with human computer systems in a way that should have been impossible. Within seconds, the main screen showed a detailed real-time map of the approaching Zephyrian forces, complete with unit designations, weapon loadouts, and tactical objectives. "How is it doing this?" someone whispered. "The collar is designed to interface with Zephyrian command systems," Dr. Reyes explained, consulting her readings in amazement. "It's essentially hacking their entire tactical network and translating the data for us." The Warhound made an urgent barking sound and tapped the display with its paw, highlighting a section of the base's northern perimeter. The tactical readout showed that the Zephyrian forces were planning a feint attack on the eastern wall while massing their real assault forces for a breakthrough on the north side. "They're using standard Zephyrian breakthrough tactics," Colonel Morrison realized. "If this intel is accurate, we can reposit our defensive positions and turn their own strategy against them." The creature seemed to understand that its information was being accepted and acted upon. It settled into a position where it could see both the tactical display and the approaching battle, its amber eyes reflecting an intelligence that was both alien and remarkably familiar. "All units, this is Colonel Morrison," the base commander announced over the comm system. "We have reliable intelligence on enemy positions and tactics. Reposition according to the coordinates I'm transmitting now." The battle that followed was unlike anything the human forces had experienced. With real-time intelligence from the Warhound's collar, they could track every Zephyrian movement, anticipate every tactical shift, and respond to threats before they fully developed. The creature itself remained in the command center, occasionally vocalizing warnings or updating tactical information as the situation evolved. But it was what happened during the most critical moment of the battle that truly demonstrated the depth of the bond forming between the humans and their unlikely ally. A Zephyrian assault team had breached the outer perimeter and was advancing on the command center. Standard defensive protocols called for the command staff to evacuate to the secondary bunker, but the Warhound refused to move. Instead, it positioned itself between the approaching enemy forces and the tactical display, its teeth bared in a display of protective aggression that needed no translation. "It's protecting the command center," Captain Chen realized. "It knows how critical the intelligence coordination is to our defense." 3 Zephyrian soldiers burst through the blast doors, their energy weapons already charging. They stopped dead when they saw the Warhound standing in the center of the room, its collar blazing with warning lights and its entire posture radiating deadly intent. One of the soldiers said something in the harsh, guttural Zephyrian language. The Warhound's response was immediate and unmistakable. It snarled, a sound that seemed to convey both contempt and defiance, then launched itself at the nearest attacker despite its injured leg. The fight was over in seconds. The Warhound moved with a fluid grace that spoke of genetic engineering and centuries of selective breeding for combat effectiveness. But it wasn't just the creature's physical capabilities that won the battle. It was the tactical intelligence that allowed it to predict and counter each opponent's movements. When the last Zephyrian soldier fell, the Warhound immediately returned to its position by the tactical display, checking the status of the overall battle before turning to ensure that the human command staff was unharmed. Its eyes met Captain Chen's, and she saw something there that made her heart skip a beat. The creature wasn't just protecting valuable intelligence assets or following its training, it was defending its pack, its family, its chosen people. "Captain," Dr. Reyes said softly, "I'm reading massive neural activity spikes. The emotional responses I'm detecting are consistent with what we see in highly social Earth mammals when defending their offspring or pack members." The Warhound approached Captain Chen and gently placed its massive head against her leg, the same gesture of affection it had shown during those first moments after the rescue. But now there was something different in the contact, a sense of belonging and mutual protection that transcended species barriers. "You chose us," Chen whispered, running her fingers through the alien fur. "Out of all the species in the galaxy, you chose humanity." The creature made a soft sound that might have been agreement, then returned its attention to the tactical display. The battle was winding down, with Zephyrian forces retreating after suffering massive casualties due to the humans' unprecedented tactical advantage. But even as victory became certain, the Warhound remained alert and focused. It had found something worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth bleeding for. It had found a home among the stars, and it was prepared to defend that home with every fiber of its genetically enhanced being. Colonel Morrison approached the creature cautiously, still somewhat overwhelmed by what he had witnessed. "Doctor, what do we call it? We can't keep referring to it as the Warhound or the creature." The alien animal looked up at the sound of their voices, its tail moving in the greeting gesture that had become so familiar. Captain Chen studied its face, noting the intelligence in those amber eyes, the nobility in its bearing, and the unmistakable loyalty that radiated from its entire being. "Ranger," she said suddenly. "We call it Ranger." The Warhound's ears perked up at the name, and it made a soft, chuffing sound that they had learned meant approval. Then it did something that brought tears to several pairs of eyes in the command center. It wagged its tail. Over the following days, word spread throughout the base about the alien Warhound that had chosen humanity over its own species. Soldiers began stopping by the medical bay just to catch a glimpse of Ranger, and the creature seemed to enjoy the attention, greeting each visitor with the same gentle dignity it showed to its primary caretakers. But it was the children's video messages from Earth that truly revealed the depth of Ranger's emotional capacity. Dr. Reyes had suggested showing the creature recordings of Earth animals, partly for research purposes and partly to see how it would react to seeing other domesticated species. What they hadn't expected was Ranger's reaction to the human children who appeared in many of the videos. The alien creature became transfixed by images of young humans playing with dogs and cats. Its breathing would change, becoming softer and more rhythmic, and it would make gentle sounds that conveyed such tenderness that even the most hardened soldiers found themselves moved to tears. "It understands," Dr. Reyes explained to a gathering of base personnel. "It recognizes the bond between humans and their companion animals, and it wants to be part of that relationship. This creature doesn't just want to help us fight. It wants to belong to us." Captain Chen spent her off-duty hours with Ranger, reading to it from her personal tablet and sharing stories about her life on Earth. The creature listened with rapt attention, occasionally making sounds that seemed to be questions or requests for clarification. It was during one of these sessions that Ranger did something that changed everything once again. Chen had been reading a message from her sister back on Earth, describing her young nephew's first day of school. As she read about the little boy's nervousness and how the family dog had provided comfort and companionship, Ranger suddenly stood up and moved to the communications console. The creature looked at the device, then at Captain Chen, then back at the console. It made a series of soft vocalizations while touching its collar. And suddenly, the display lit up with an outgoing transmission request. "It wants to contact Earth," Dr. Reyes breathed, checking the readings on her scanner. "The collar has been analyzing our communication protocols, and it's figured out how to establish a connection. But why would it want to—" Captain Chen's question was answered when the transmission connected and her sister's face appeared on the screen. In the background, they could see her nephew playing with the family's golden retriever, the same scene that had been described in the message. Ranger approached the screen slowly, its amber eyes fixed on the image of the child and dog. When the boy looked up and saw the alien creature on his aunt's transmission, his face lit up with the kind of joy that only children can express. "Wow!" the boy exclaimed. "Aunt Sarah, is that your space dog?" Ranger's tail began to wag furiously at the sound of the word dog. The creature moved closer to the screen and made a gentle chuffing sound that somehow conveyed both greeting and affection. The boy giggled and pressed his face close to his end of the transmission. "Hi, space dog. Are you taking care of my aunt?" Ranger looked at Captain Chen, then back at the screen and nodded solemnly. The gesture was so human, so unmistakably deliberate, that everyone in the room understood they were witnessing something unprecedented in human history. First contact wasn't happening between governments or military forces. It was happening between a child and an alien creature who had chosen to become humanity's protector, friend, and family member. And in that moment, as they watched Ranger gently touch the screen where the boy's face smiled back at them, every human in that room understood that they were no longer fighting just for territory or resources or political ideology. They were fighting for family. And Ranger was family now, as surely as if it had been born on Earth among green fields and blue skies, instead of on some distant alien world among the machinery of war. 6 months after the rescue, Firebase Echo had become the most strategically important human installation in the sector, and its success was due largely to a four-legged alien who had somehow learned to play fetch with plasma grenades and could predict enemy movements with an accuracy that bordered on supernatural. Ranger had become more than just a mascot or intelligence asset. The creature had become the heart of the base, the living symbol of what humanity could accomplish when they extended their natural capacity for love and loyalty beyond the boundaries of their own species. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the expanded command center, watching as Ranger interfaced with the tactical systems for the morning intelligence briefing. The alien warhound's collar had been enhanced with human technology, creating a hybrid interface that allowed for unprecedented coordination between human and alien intelligence networks. "Status report," Colonel Morrison requested as he entered the command center. "Zephyrian forces are massing for a major offensive," Chen replied, indicating the holographic display that Ranger was manipulating with practiced ease. "But they're making a crucial mistake. They still don't know about our intelligence advantage." Ranger looked up from the display and made a sound that had become known throughout the base as his battle-ready vocalization. The creature's injury had healed completely, leaving him stronger and more agile than ever. His bond with the human personnel had deepened to the point where he could predict their needs and responses with uncanny accuracy. "How many ships are we looking at?" Morrison asked. Ranger manipulated the display to show a fleet of nearly 200 Zephyrian vessels approaching the system. The alien creature's expression grew serious as it highlighted the flagship, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed anything the humans had encountered before. "He's showing us something specific about that big ship," Dr. Reyes observed, studying her readings. "Neural activity is off the charts. Ranger recognizes that vessel." The Warhound moved away from the tactical display and approached a secondary console, its claws clicking on the metal floor. With deliberate movements, it activated the communication system and began transmitting a complex series of signals through its collar. "What's he doing?" Morrison demanded. "He's accessing the Zephyrian command network," Chen realized. "But this time, he's not just gathering intelligence, he's actively communicating with someone." The main screen flickered and suddenly showed the interior of the Zephyrian flagship's bridge. A massive alien figure dominated the center of the display, its scaled hide scarred by countless battles, and its forearms ending in claws that could rend steel. This was clearly a high-ranking Zephyrian commander, and when it saw Ranger on the transmission, its reaction was immediate and shocking. The alien commander made a sound that could only be described as a howl of anguish, and its entire bearing changed from predatory confidence to something approaching desperation. "Translation algorithms are working," Dr. Reyes announced, her voice tight with concentration. "The alien is speaking in what appears to be, it's calling Ranger by name, an actual name." The translation software managed to process enough of the alien language to provide subtitles on the screen. What they revealed stunned everyone in the command center. "Shadow Hunter, my faithful companion," the Zephyrian commander was saying. You have been gone so long. I feared you were dead. Come home, my friend. Leave these primitive creatures and return to your pack. To your purpose." Ranger stood perfectly still, studying the image of the alien commander with an expression that was impossible to read. For a long moment, the only sound in the command center was the soft hum of electronic equipment and the distant sounds of the base going about its daily operations. Then Ranger did something that would define the future relationship between humanity and the wider galaxy. The alien war hound looked directly at Captain Chen, then back at the screen. When it spoke, using its own vocal cords to produce sounds that the translation software could process, every human in the room felt a chill run down their spine. "I have found my home," Ranger said, his voice a deep, melodious sound that carried undertones of absolute certainty. "I have found my true pack. These humans showed me kindness when I was wounded and abandoned. They chose to save me when you left me to die." The Zephyrian commander's reaction was immediate and violent. It snarled something that the translation software rendered as a series of curses and threats. But Ranger remained calm, his amber eyes never leaving the screen. "You were bred for war," the commander continued. "You were designed to serve the Empire. You cannot abandon your genetic purpose for these weak mammals." Ranger tilted his head in the gesture that had become so familiar to the humans around him. "I was bred for loyalty," he replied simply, "and I have chosen where my loyalty belongs." The alien commander fell silent, its four eyes studying Ranger with an intensity that spoke of deep emotional pain. When it finally spoke again, its voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Shadowhunter, these creatures will use you and discard you when you are no longer useful. It is the way of all lesser species. Come home before they betray your trust." This time it was Captain Chen who stepped forward. Moving to stand beside Ranger, she placed her hand on the alien creature's head in a gesture of protection and companionship. "With respect," she said, addressing the Zephyrian commander directly, "Ranger isn't our tool or weapon. He's our friend, our family, and family doesn't abandon each other." Ranger leaned against her leg, his massive form radiating contentment and security. When he spoke again, his words carried the weight of absolute conviction. "I am no longer Shadowhunter," he said. "I am Ranger. I am a guardian of humanity, a protector of those who showed me that there is more to existence than endless war. I choose love over conquest, cooperation over domination." The Zephyrian commander stared at the image of its former warhound for several long seconds. When it finally spoke, its voice carried a note of something that might have been respect. "Then you are lost to us," it said. "But perhaps that is not entirely a tragedy. The Empire has forgotten much in its pursuit of victory. Maybe you have found something we abandoned long ago." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in absolute silence. Ranger looked up at Captain Chen, his expression peaceful and determined. "Well," Colonel Morrison said finally, "I guess that settles the question of which side you're on." But Ranger's revelation about his origins had implications that went far beyond simple loyalty. Over the following weeks, as the Zephyrian fleet approached human space, Ranger worked tirelessly to share everything he knew about enemy tactics, technology, and psychology. What emerged was a picture of a galactic empire that had once been very different from the conquest-focused military machine it had become. Through Ranger's memories, transmitted via his enhanced collar system, the humans learned about Zephyrian art, music, philosophy, and most importantly, their ancient traditions of companion bonding. "They used to be like us," Dr. Reyes explained during a briefing with Terran Fleet Command via quantum transmission. "The warhounds weren't originally weapons. They were companions, partners, friends. The Zephyrian Empire bred the emotional capacity out of most of their population, but they kept it alive in their companion species. Admiral Thompson, speaking from the flagship of the approaching Terran relief fleet, leaned forward with interest. "Are you suggesting that this creature represents something the Zephyrians have lost?" "More than that," Captain Chen interjected. "Ranger represents something they want back. We've been monitoring Zephyrian communications, and there's been significant discussion about what they call the reclamation of the bond. Their commander's reaction wasn't just about losing a valuable asset. It was about losing a friend." Ranger, who had been lying quietly beside the communications console, suddenly stood and approached the display. His collar flickered with incoming data, and his expression became urgent. "The fleet is slowing," Dr. Reyes reported, checking her readings. "Zephyrian ships are dropping out of hyperspace well outside their normal attack range." Ranger manipulated the tactical display to show the enemy formation. Instead of the aggressive assault posture they had expected, the Zephyrian ships were arranged in what appeared to be a defensive pattern, almost as if they were uncertain about their next move. "They're hesitating," Chen realized. "Ranger's defection has them questioning their assumptions about this war." The alien creature confirmed her assessment with a soft vocalization that the translation software rendered as uncertainty and reevaluation. Then Ranger did something that surprised everyone. He activated the long-range communications array and began broadcasting on all Zephyrian military frequencies. What followed was a speech that would be remembered as one of the defining moments of interstellar diplomacy. "I am the one you call Shadow Hunter," Ranger said, his voice carrying clearly across the void between ships. "I speak now to all who hear this transmission, warrior and civilian alike. I have lived among humans for many cycles, and I have learned truths that our empire has forgotten." The base personnel watched in amazement as communication activity across the Zephyrian fleet increased dramatically. Ranger was reaching not just the military commanders, but the civilian population aboard the ships, the support staff, the engineers, and most importantly, the other companion species who served alongside their Zephyrian partners. "Humans are not weak," Ranger continued. "They are not primitive. They possess something that makes them stronger than any weapon, more valuable than any territory. They possess the ability to love without condition, to sacrifice for others, to find meaning in protection, rather than conquest." The display showed several Zephyrian ships breaking formation, moving closer to receive the transmission more clearly. Ranger's words were being retransmitted across their entire network, reaching every corner of the approaching fleet. "They saved me when I was wounded and abandoned," the alien warhound continued. "They healed my body and showed me what it means to belong to something greater than warfare. They gave me a name that represents who I choose to be, not what I was designed to accomplish." A new voice joined the transmission, speaking in Zephyrian. The translation software identified it as coming from one of the warhounds still serving with the fleet. "Shadow Hunter, we have heard whispers of your transformation. Is it true that the humans treat you as an equal, not as a tool?" Ranger's response carried a warmth that resonated through every human heart listening. "They treat me as family," he said simply. "They share their food, their shelter, their stories, their affection. They ask nothing of me except to be myself. They celebrate my successes and comfort my sorrows. They have shown me that there is more to existence than victory in battle." More voices joined the conversation, creating a cacophony of questions and wonder that the translation systems could barely keep up with. But one voice cut through the noise with the authority of absolute command. "Enough!" The Zephyrian commander's familiar voice boomed across the communication channels. "Shadowhunter speaks of fantasies and impossibilities. These humans have deceived him with false promises and emotional manipulation." But Ranger was ready for this challenge. He looked directly at the communication array, and when he spoke, his voice carried the quiet confidence of absolute truth. "General Vorthak," he said, using the commander's name with obvious familiarity, "you know me better than any other. You raised me from a pup, trained me, fought beside me for 7 years. Have I ever lied to you? Have I ever reported false intelligence or led you into danger through deception?" The silence that followed was deafening. When the Zephyrian commander finally responded, his voice was quieter, more thoughtful. "No," General Vorthak admitted. "You have always been truthful, always loyal, always accurate in your assessments." "Then hear me now," Ranger said. "Everything I have told you about humanity is true. They are capable of bonds deeper than genetic programming, loyalty stronger than imperial decree, and love that transcends species boundaries. They saved me not because I was useful to them, but because I was suffering. They welcomed me not because I could fight for them, but because they saw me as a being worthy of respect and affection." The Zephyrian commander was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a civilization's worth of accumulated loneliness. "What you describe," General Vorthak said slowly, "sounds very much like what our ancestors called the old way. Before the Empire, before the endless wars, before we bred the capacity for such bonds out of our population." "Yes," Ranger replied gently. "It is exactly like the old way, and it could be your way again." What happened next would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. One by one, Zephyrian ships began requesting permission to approach Firebase Echo under a flag of truce. They came not as conquerors, but as beings hungry for something they had almost forgotten how to want. They came seeking the same thing Ranger had found among the humans: a chance to belong, to be loved, to be part of something greater than warfare and dominion. Captain Chen stood beside Ranger on the observation deck as the first Zephyrian shuttle landed at the base. Through the reinforced windows, they could see alien figures emerging from their craft, their movements tentative and uncertain. "Are you ready for this?" she asked her four-legged friend. Ranger looked up at her with those amber eyes that had first captured her heart 6 months ago on a battlefield littered with the debris of war. His tail wagged slowly, and he made the soft, chuffing sound that she had learned meant contentment and anticipation. "I am ready," he said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had found their purpose. "I am ready to show them what I have learned about being human." As they walked toward the landing pad to greet their former enemies, Captain Chen reflected on the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple act of compassion, a decision to save a wounded creature that could have been left to die. But that single act of human kindness had rippled outward, touching not just one alien life, but potentially transforming an entire galactic civilization. Ranger had chosen humanity not because they were the strongest or most advanced species, but because they had shown him what he had never experienced under the Zephyrian Empire. They had shown him love, and now, as representatives of two species stood together on the threshold of a new age, it was clear that love was indeed the most powerful force in the universe, strong enough to end wars, bridge the gaps between stars, and transform enemies into family. Ranger had taught them all that the greatest victory wasn't won through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the simple willingness to extend compassion to a stranger in need. In saving one alien warhound, humanity had ultimately saved themselves, and possibly the galaxy along with them.